Hello everyone. Today, I'm excited to introduce you to a psychological thriller from South Korea called Hypnosis. Our story centers around a girl named Mina. She's the classic ice queen, stunningly beautiful but emotionally distant, which often makes her a target for jealousy and isolation from her female classmate. However, she maintains close friendships with several male companions she's known since childhood. On this particular night, Mina follows her usual routine, practicing alone in the dance studio, completely unaware of a sharp pin scattered on the floor. With a piercing scream, she accidentally steps on the needle, grinding her teeth through the pain. She pulls out the pin, but at that exact moment, all the lights in the dance room suddenly cut out. At first, Mina assumes it's some cruel prank by a student who dislikes her. She shouts angrily, demanding the lights be turned back on, but the only response is Mina's chilling silence. Left with no choice, she begins feeling her way through the pitch-black room, searching for the power switch. Carefully extending her arms, she suddenly touches something in muscular arm. Mina is terrified beyond belief. Just as she's about to scream, powerful hands suddenly wrap around her throat. She struggles desperately, but what she sees in the mirror's reflection is impossible. There's no masked killer strangling her. She's strangling herself. Mina collapses to the floor, trembling uncontrollably. From that night forward, she's haunted every night by nightmares of a mysterious killer in a burlap sack mask hunting her down. Unable to bear it any longer, she reaches out to her friend Dong-SIK for help. Dong-SIK, please help me. Seung-Min is back, and she wants me dead. But Dong-SIK is completely baffled. Who's Seung-Min? I don't remember us ever knowing anyone by that name. All Dong-SIK can do is comfort her. Mina, don't overthink this. Maybe it's just stress from everything lately. Get some rest, and we'll talk about it tomorrow in person. However, the next morning, worried about Mina's condition, Dong-SIK repeatedly calls her phone, but there's no answer. His sense of dread growing stronger. He rushes toward Mina's dormitory building. Just as he arrives at the base of the building, Mina leaps from the rooftop, crashing heavily onto the ground below. Blood instantly stains the concrete pavement red. Dong-SIK is struck speechless by this sudden tragedy. Mina's death leaves him drowning in confusion and grief. To break the devastating news to their other friend, he first calls A-Jun. A-Jun, Mina, she's dead. There's a moment of silence on the other end. Then A-Jun responds, Dong-SIK, are you having some kind of mental breakdown? Mina's right here next to me. Perfectly fine. Dong-SIK is stunned. What are you talking about? That's impossible. I witnessed her jump from the building with my own eyes. A-Jun's tone doesn't sound like he's joking, which sends chills down Dong-SIK's spine. A-Jun slowly approaches Mina, who's sitting at the table with her back to him. All he can see is Mina facing away, making strange creak sounds, as if she's scratching something with her hands. A-Jun cautiously asks, Mina, what are you doing? Mina slowly turns around, and A-Jun is immediately terrified by what he sees. At that moment, time seems to rewind. A-Jun finds himself back at the instant he answered the phone, and the horrifying version of Mina has vanished. When the two friends meet up, A-Jun tells Dong-SIK about this bizarre encounter. Even more disturbing, A-Jun also claims he has no memory of who this Seung-Min that Mina mentioned could be. Just as they're puzzling over Mina's death, another strange incident occurs at school. A student named Xiao-Hao, who transferred from a psychiatric hospital and regularly receives hypnotrophia for his amnesia, begins acting extremely bizarre during class. Xiao-Hao suddenly stops taking notes and stares blankly at his fingers. Then, to everyone's horror, he starts sharpening his own finger, as if it were a pencil. Fortunately, the female classmate's terrified screams stop him. The teacher immediately calls an ambulance, and Xiao-Hao is rushed to the hospital. But no one expects that Xiao-Hao mysteriously dies in the hospital that very night. The series of abnormal events makes Dong-SIK realize that none of this can be coincidental. He begins to suspect these deaths are connected to the recent hypnotrophia sessions everyone has been receiving. Searching for evidence, Dong-SIK begins looking online for the two characters Ziyun that Mina mentioned during hypnosis. His persistence pays off when he finally discovers an old photograph on a webpage for something called Ziyun Church. What shocks him is that the photo shows images of them as children. The children in the photo include Dong-SIK, Mina, A-Jun, Xiao-Wei, and several other unfamiliar kids they have no memory of. Filled with questions, Dong-SIK and A-Jun decide to travel to Ziyun to investigate in person. However, when they arrive at their destination, local residents tell them it's not a church at all, but rather an abandoned medical facility that once treated children with psychological disorders. Although the gates are locked, this doesn't deter their determination to find the truth. They climb over the fence and enter the eerie, abandoned building. In a drawer in the director's office, they find an old burlap sack, hood exactly like the one Mina saw in her hallucinations. At that moment, an elderly security guard who watches over the place discovers them. From the old guard, they learn a shocking truth: the Seung-Min that Mina spoke of died 10 years ago. Because of her unusual appearance, Seung-Min was frequently bullied by the other children. Then one day, a fire suddenly broke out. Most of the children escaped, but Seung-Min was trapped in the basement and burned alive. This incident caused a huge uproar, and the director, unable to bear the pressure, committed suicide. The place has been abandoned ever since. Upon hearing this, Dong minus Sesaikai and Dae minus Jun exchange glances. Now knowing the truth, they realize they must immediately warn their other friends. They split up. A minus Jun heads to the police station to investigate the mysterious director's records, while Dong minus Sesaikai returns to school to warn Xiao minus Wei. But clearly, it's already too late for everything. Xiao minus Wei is in class when suddenly the bell rings with an unnaturally sharp sound. The bell seems to have magical powers, instantly causing Xiao minus Wei to lose emotional control. Her nose bleeds uncontrollably, and her eyes become vacant and terrifying. She frantically rushes out of the classroom, but at the stairwell, she carelessly slips and tumbles down the steps. Just as she struggles to lift her head, that terrifying figure wearing the burlap sack appears before her again. Then, to everyone's shock, she plunges her face into boiling hot water. Meanwhile, A-Jun, who went to the police station, couldn't escape death pursuit either. On the bus to the police station, A-Jun listens to the beep sounds of passengers tapping their cars as they board, feeling increasingly agitated and restless. The sound echoes in his mind like a death knell. A-Jun closes his eyes tightly, trying to calm himself down, but when he opens them again, he finds himself in a dilapidated room. Sung-min, wearing the burlap sack, slowly walks up to him and holds a sharp piece of glass to his lips. A-Jun desperately shakes his head in resistance, but an invisible force controls his body, making him swallow the glass shards one by one. Blood trickles down the corner of his mouth. In reality, on the bus, A-Jun bites his own tongue and collapses to the ground, dead. When Dong-Sesaikai arrives at school, Xiao-Wei is already dead. In the empty classroom, Dong-Sesaikai encounters someone who has been waiting for him, their advisor, Teacher Yang. Teacher Yang slowly stands up. 10 years ago, do you remember what you children did to my daughter Sung-min at the Zian facility? Dong-Sesaikai instinctively steps backward because he can't remember anything now. At this moment, Teacher Yang's voice is filled with hatred. It was Xiao-Hao who started the fire that burned my poor daughter alive in that oil room, and you motorists, to escape responsibility, pinned all the blame on my husband, the director. You claimed he abused children, which drove my husband, the director, to suicide in despair. Hearing this, Dong-Sesaikai finally remembers everything. Those deliberately forgotten, vicious memories come flooding back like a tide. Teacher Yang then points to a large oil drum in the corner of the classroom. Dong-Sesaikai's body is no longer under his control. He mechanically walks toward the drum and slowly climbs inside. In the cramped, dark space, Dong-Sesaikai finally experiences the fear and helplessness that Sung-min felt back then. In his final moments, he sees the innocent girl they tortured to death. However, there's one final, shocking truth to the story. Back then at the Zeum facility, the director actually knew all along that these children had caused Sung-min's death. But as a compassionate educator, he chose not to punish these young offenders, hoping instead to help them become better people through treatment.